figured for a Hallows Eve special, I could either talk about a bunch of scary animated works that everybody already knows, or I could delve into a subject that's gotten some traction on the tube lately, specifically media works that traumatized me as a child, or at least mildly unnerved me for a night or two, but were still memorable enough for me to recall their effect on me even now. Some background: I did not grow up watching horror movies. Heck, my mom didn't even record the scary parts of certain movies, like the pink elephant sequence from Dumbo or Hexus from Ferngully. Yes, it did make the ending of that movie very anticlimactic. Not that it really matters, as witnessed by similar lists, even if you manage to avoid the obviously dark stuff, there's no shortage of subtle disturbances in even the most brightly colored innocent looking of products. Case in point, my first entry. It doesn't shock me at all that quite a bit of people can recall Sesame Street skits that scared them in their youth. Even if they didn't have particularly scary subjects, sometimes their attempt to pay homage/parody certain classic films, they manage to capture the atmosphere a little too well. A lot of these, I imagine, take place in the Count's castle. That was certainly likely the earliest I and others were exposed to the classic horror film aesthetic. But more likely that some stuff was just weird, like the Twin Beaks skit, or those freaky Martians. But the one that really stuck in my head, despite really not being that scary, was Ernie and Bert in the Egyptian pyramid, or I guess that's supposed to be a museum. Okay, first can we acknowledge how amazing Ernie and Bert are, and how like everything they do still manages to be hilarious even now? I really don't know what it was about this skit that got to me. Maybe it was how scared Ernie was, how Bert didn't believe him, the first time it was implanted in my head that inanimate objects could move on their own. Maybe it was just that opening and closing music, but I think it was that weird echoey voice.
I'm sure it was my imagination. That statue you didn't tap me, did you, statue?
Sure I did.
Probably a combo of everything. Either way, like a lot of Sesame Street, you can be innocent, funny, educational, and unnerving at the same time. Now, I have never regularly watched X-Files, and I never will, but my mom did all the time. I usually just ignored it when I passed through the TV room, but one time, somehow, I managed to get mildly sucked into one episode, and yes, even though I can see the full episode now, this is what I remember from it as a child. So there was this weird hairy guy named Max who was fine at first, but then all of a sudden starts shaking because apparently he had epilepsy, but I didn't know that at the time. Then suddenly his ears starts bleeding, then everyone's looking for him, Mulder finds him in a warehouse, and then this happens.
Max!
Ugh. And I didn't even remember those evil dead camera shots. Yeah, it looks pretty silly now, and even at the time I thought it was weird, but I wasn't freaked. But given some time and some nights in the dark to marinate in my underage exaggerating brain, and from then on, every time I heard the X-Files theme, I ran in the opposite direction. Which, by itself, is a very creepy theme. If you were making a list of the most terrifying pieces of music, that would definitely have to be one of them. In fact, when I was in elementary school, there was this end-of-the-year performance showcase, and one of the older classes did this kind of interpretive dance to the X-Files theme, and I might have freaked out a bit. There might have been whimpering. Yeesh, just imagine if I had seen Hush when I was a kid.
John Adams High, where you are gonna die, that's right.
Phoebe, you are so low budget.
Like we've stated, just because you may not watch horror movies doesn't mean you don't get exposed to some of their visuals and tropes. The Boy Meets World Halloween special is a parody of a horror movie, but still manages to be kind of freaky. The gang get locked inside the school during detention, and people, one by one, start getting killed off. Well, killed off. It's not hard to figure out that this isn't really happening, especially when the cause of death is book. It's mostly played pretty campy and ridiculous, and diffuses almost every scary moment with a goofy line. Still, one of its first main scares is a kid getting a pencil shoved through his head!
We'll always remember he was that tall.
Most of the elements here really wouldn't be scary at all if they weren't accompanied by that incredibly unsubtle but still unnerving music.
Do you like scary movies? What's your favorite?
Ooh, okay.
Well, I like that one with the hottie hot hot from Party of Five.
And the first time the hooded figure with the skull shows up with a sudden loud score, it really is kind of freaky, and certainly one of my first jump scares. A nice mix of scary and funny, and certainly plenty of 90s.
It's like a movie. It's a B-movie show.
Ugh, brave little toaster. This movie is just creepy all the way through. From the screaming air conditioner, to characters getting mutilated, to potentially humans getting mutilated, and hey, more classic horror movie homages, to even mildly disturbing things like certain character designs and that weird flower scene. Even if the most obviously scary thing about this movie is still that musical number with all the Frankenstein broken appliances, I still can't forget about that freaking clown, man! Toaster has a dream that seems to start out fine and then gradually turn into literal hell. Sure, overall it's a pretty quick scene where he gets freaked out by that firefighter clown and his hose of forks, and then dangles over a bathtub, but all of the elements together is prime nightmare fuel. Granted, I didn't get the full context of this as a child. I think because I had watched a lot of Batman, I just assumed it was a bathtub full of acid. Make no mistake, this is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. I love the characters, I love the journey, the song Worthless while all the cars are being destroyed, are you kidding me? It's just also objectively one of the creepiest kids movies that has ever been made. Now, it wouldn't be a childhood trauma list of an animation buff without touching on some of that classic Disney magic. And yes, there were loads of films that had their potential to be baby's first nightmare. I've said before that Beauty and the Beast, the first time the Beast appears, kind of freaked me out, and believe me, I genuinely wonder why this spot isn't going to Night at Bald Mountain. I guess I was just more fascinated by that scene than scared. But the one scene that really got to me, kind of like everything else on this list, is mostly thanks to the music. As far as I'm concerned, you can keep your ch-ch-ch-ch and your do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and your dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, and your ee-ee-ee-ee-ee, and even your da-dum. And I think at some point I just started to see how many classic horror themes I could recall, but to me, this is one of the most terrifying pieces of music ever written. This still chills me to this day. And while the music is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the visuals are no slouch either. Particularly the coloring and the slow, hypnotized zombie way Aurora starts moving, and how she just disappears in the fireplace. The fairies yelling after her both heightens the tension of that moment, but also kind of interrupts the atmosphere, so it couldn't be number one. And it's not as though Bald Mountain or the actual villain of the movie had no effect on me, but for the most terrifying Disney moment, I would have to give it to this. And now, for the film that had the most bone-chilling, longest physical reaction on me is... I have been informed that I'm being grossly fined for mentioning Christmas before Halloween is over. It's one of the more reasonable fines our culture possesses, but the fact is, it's just true. Christmas Carol, specifically the Muppet Variety, is the one film that actively scared me the longest. It's probably because I periodically watched it every year, and usually not in between, because I loved it so much, but still, every year, when a certain scene came out, I would directly make my way to the bathroom. To hide. Just hide. And it has everything to do with the Marleys.
Looking older and more wicked than ever. I knew he wouldn't disappoint us.
Well, minus the actual Marleys. Yes, everything that comes after their arrival is fairly comical, though the song is actually pretty chilling. But everything to do with the build-up to their arrival is terrifying. Even when one of the Marleys appears as the door knocker and he yells at him, it knocks you back. Again, using a lot of techniques they use in classic horror films. Long stretches of quiet, low lighting, shadows, subtle music, old creepy Victorian houses, that glowing staircase that the camera just passes by like it's not important. But the real pincher is that bell. Those sudden benign but unexplainable noises. As far as I'm concerned, no matter how funny your Christmas Carol has to be, if you don't manage to make the Marley scene a little scary, you are a failure. Which is why I feel I also need to mention the Mickey's Christmas Carol as sort of a 1.5. Which is another case where Marley himself is funny, but the build-up still manages to be sort of scary. The image of Marley following Scrooge up the stairs is something so impactful, and no other Christmas Carol has done anything like it. And it is one of the clearest images I have from one of my actual nightmares, the goofy Marley shadow on my home staircase. And I know what you're thinking. That freaked you out? Not Pete Satan pushing Scrooge into his own grave? Hey, that scene is still pretty disturbing, but I think at the time I wasn't really sure what a coffin was and just remembered the smoke. And you know what really makes the whole Marley's thing freakier to me personally? When I was a kid and we stayed at my grandma's place, my sister and I would stay on the 3rd floor. And the staircase up to that room was really steep and narrow and dimly lit, and at the base of that staircase were bells. This entire scene just seemed to be birthed straight out of my nightmares, and I always hated going up and down these frickin' stairs. Other than that, what I remember of the house was really beautiful. Oh, and even better, now those bells are in my childhood home, which is fine, just don't put it outside my door. Not kidding, Dad. You can blast that trombone to wake me up as much as you want, just put the bells somewhere else. Not kidding, not even as a joke. So, Animaniacs, what terrified you as a child? Comment, like, subscribe, etc., and you stay incredibly shiny, Animaniacs, and have a great Halloween.
The crypt doors creak and the tombstones quake.
Some mouthfuls swing and wake,
Happy haunts materialize.
and begin to vocalize. Grim grinning ghosts come out to socialize.